The last transmission from the Galactic Council came in the form of cold, impersonal text. Due to unsustainable conditions and lack of strategic value, the Sol system is hereby classified as a lost sector. No further assistance will be provided. And then, silence. The skies of Earth burned as the final warships of the galactic empires vanished into the void, abandoning humanity to its fate. The Council had declared Earth a casualty of war, an acceptable loss in the grand scheme of the galaxy. Their reasoning was simple. Humans were too weak to recover. The war had left their world shattered, their resources depleted, and their leadership in disarray. To the great empires, Earth was a dying ember, a relic of the past that would soon be forgotten. But humanity was not weak. At first, the survivors struggled. Billions had perished, and those who remained had to scavenge through the ruins of a world stripped of aid and technology. Cities became silent graveyards. Starships rusted in abandoned docks, their fuel reserves long since drained. The sky, once filled with the glow of orbital stations, became an empty void. Earth was alone. But humans had never relied on the kindness of others. In the absence of outside help, they turned inward. They rebuilt their world, not in the image of the past, but with something new, something stronger. The betrayal of the Council burned in their memories, but instead of despair, it fueled their determination. They stripped their broken ships apart, reverse engineering technology they had once been forbidden to understand. They'd rebuilt industry, redefined warfare, and developed sciences that surpassed the very civilizations that had abandoned them. Generations passed, and the universe forgot about Earth. The great empires expanded, waged new wars, and brokered new alliances, believing the Sol system to be nothing more than a dead relic. No one had any reason to check. No one had any reason to fear. And so, when a new fleet appeared at the fringes of galactic space, silent, black as the void, moving with the precision of a predator, no one recognized them. The first warning came from a deep space listening post near the Thalos trade route. A board communications officer, half asleep at his station, suddenly found himself staring at an incoming fleet of unknown origin. Hundreds of vessels, sleek and sharp, moving in perfect synchronization. There were no hails, no identification codes, no insignias, just a single transmission sent across every available channel in the galaxy. We remember. Then the fleet moved. Thalos Prime, a bustling trade hub and the economic heart of the galactic core, fell within hours. Entire defense systems went offline without a single shot being fired. Government officials scrambled for answers, but none came, because the attackers did not negotiate. They did not demand surrender. The forgotten had returned, and they were here for retribution. The Thalos Prime massacre sent shockwaves through the galaxy. One moment, the trade hub was a thriving center of commerce, its docks filled with ships from every corner of known space. The next, it was a graveyard, its orbital defenses shut down as if they had never existed, its military garrisons neutralized without a single distress call escaping. The station's black box recorded only one thing before silence overtook it. We remember. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The chamber, a vast circular hall filled with the voices of 100 different species, was in chaos. Some demanded immediate retaliation. Others, more cautious, urged patience until the attacker's identity was confirmed. They didn't have to wait long. 3 more systems fell within the next cycle. This time, there were survivors, panicked officials, terrified refugees, and stunned military officers, all speaking of the same impossible nightmare. They were human. The word sent a chill through the chamber. The mere idea was absurd. Humanity had been written off centuries ago, their homeworld left to die. No ships had been seen from the Sol system since their exile. No diplomatic envoys, no trade requests. Nothing. By all accounts, Earth had been a dead world. And yet, here they were. The Council's highest-ranking military officer, Grand Admiral Jorvac of the Yelthan Dominion, dismissed the reports as exaggerated hysteria. "It is impossible," he stated, his voice cold and firm. "Humans lack the technology to rebuild themselves, let alone wage war. This is the work of a new enemy using their image as psychological warfare." But the evidence was undeniable. Hacked databases, entire fleets reduced to drifting wrecks, surveillance footage of black warships tearing through capital vessels with terrifying precision. The humans had not only survived, they had evolved into something far deadlier than anyone had imagined. An emergency fleet was assembled and dispatched to the Midorian system, where intelligence suggested the next attack would come. The Council wanted answers, and if this was truly humanity's doing, they intended to remind them of their place. The fleet consisted of over 1,000 warships, drawn from multiple empires. At its heart was the Celestial Spear, the Council's flagship, a vessel so heavily armored and armed that it was said to be indestructible. The admirals in command were confident. They were the might of the galaxy. No backwater species could possibly challenge them. For 12 hours, they waited. Then, space itself seemed to twist. 100 black vessels emerged from the void without warning. No hyperspace distortions, no detectable energy signatures, just pure, calculated precision. Their ships did not look like those of the past. These were not salvaged relics from a ruined Earth. They were something new, something terrifying. The Council's fleet hailed them. No response. Then, a single transmission was broadcast across all channels. The same words, repeated once more. "We remember." And then the battle began. It was not a battle. It was an execution. The Celestial Spear, the mightiest warship in the galaxy, was the first to fall. Its shields collapsed in seconds. Its hull, designed to withstand the most powerful weapons known, was torn apart as if made of paper. The Admiral's last recorded words were panicked, disbelieving. They knew everything. Our tactics, our frequencies, our formations. They were waiting for us. The fleet did not last an hour. As the last remaining ships fled, a final message was sent. Unlike the cold, simple transmission before, this one was longer. It carried a chilling promise. "You left us to die. Now we have returned." The forgotten species was no longer forgotten. They were here, and they were not here to negotiate. Panic spread across the Galactic Council like wildfire. The Celestial Spear had been annihilated. The largest defense fleet ever assembled had been torn apart in less than an hour. The enemy hadn't just fought them. They had anticipated them. Every formation, every fallback maneuver, every encrypted frequency had been countered with terrifying precision. This wasn't just war. This was retribution. The Council's capital world, Velfar Prime, was in chaos. The once proud leaders of the galactic empires sat in their grand chamber, their voices trembling with anger, confusion, and fear. Some demanded an immediate counteroffensive. Others insisted on opening diplomatic channels. A few even whispered of surrender. And then, the next wave of attacks began. The fall of the trade worlds. Across the galaxy, entire planetary systems went dark. Humanity was not waging war like any known species. They were striking surgically, dismantling key infrastructure with terrifying efficiency. The largest trade hubs, planets that controlled supply lines, shipyards, and financial centers, were the first to fall. There was no warning, no declaration, no demands. On Action 4, the banking capital of the Council, every credit transfer system shut down at once. Wealth vanished in an instant. Economies collapsed overnight. When officials tried to restore power, they found their own security systems working against them. By the time they realized what was happening, it was already over. On Drathon Forge, the largest shipyard in the sector, defense drones turned against their creators, shredding entire fleets before they ever launched. Engineers scrambled for control, but their systems had been rewritten, reprogrammed by a ghost in the machine. Humanity had not just attacked their weapons, they had turned them into their own. The message no one expected. Amid the chaos, A new transmission appeared on every screen across the galaxy. Every station, every vessel, every personal data pad. It played everywhere, impossible to block or erase. A figure appeared, standing in the shadows of a war-torn Earth, their face concealed behind a sleek, black helmet. Their voice was calm, controlled, but it carried the weight of an entire forgotten people. You thought we would fade away. You thought the void would take us. You thought wrong. Behind them, images flickered, footage of Earth's devastation centuries ago, the Council's decision to abandon them, the sealed files proving their exile had not been necessary, but chosen. The chamber of the Council fell silent. The truth was out. You left us to die. The voice was colder now. Now you will learn what it means to be forgotten. The transmission ended, leaving only the insignia of Earth's reborn forces, a dark, angular emblem resembling a shattered world, reforged into something stronger. The Council's last hope. Desperation gripped the Council. They needed answers. They needed time. But time was no longer on their side. As they argued, another fleet vanished. Another system fell silent. And then, the final horror became clear. Humanity wasn't just winning. They were dismantling the galaxy piece by piece. The reckoning had only begun. The galaxy had faced wars before. It had survived planetary sieges, civil uprisings, and existential threats from the void. But this was different. This was a collapse from within. The Galactic Council's forces prepared for battle, reinforcing key worlds, deploying warships to strategic locations, and bolstering planetary defenses. Yet, despite their overwhelming numbers, despite their centuries of military dominance, they could not stop what was happening. Because the enemy wasn't just attacking from the outside. They were already inside. The ghosts in the system. The first signs were subtle. Malfunctions in supply chains, delayed communications between fleets, minor power outages across crucial command centers. At first, these were dismissed as coincidences, the natural failures of an overstretched empire under siege. Then, entire intelligence networks collapsed overnight. Classified documents, war plans, encryption codes, fleet movements were wiped from the most secure archives in the galaxy. High-ranking officers woke up to find their personal security overrides no longer recognized. Defense protocols turned to static. It was no longer a war of ships and soldiers. It was a war of information. And humanity had already won it. The turning of the Loyalists. As the Council scrambled to contain the chaos, another wave of destruction began. This time, not through brute force, but through whispers in the dark. On Velthar Prime, the heart of the Council, a high-ranking official received an anonymous transmission. It contained a single file, a decrypted document proving that Earth's abandonment had not been due to logistical constraints, as the Council had claimed. It had been deliberate. The Council had feared humanity's potential and decided to let them die. That official defected the next day. And they were not the only one. Across the galaxy, planetary leaders, military officers, and trade moguls were presented with the same evidence. Some resisted. Some tried to silence the truth. But others, many others, chose another path. They switched sides. Entire fleets turned against their own commanders. Defenses meant to repel human warships now fired upon their former allies. The Council's greatest strength, its unity, was fracturing. And then, the final blow came. The last broadcast. Once again, a transmission appeared on every screen in the galaxy. This time, the figure did not stand in the shadows. They stood before a vast fleet of sleek, black warships, their face still hidden beneath the eerie helmet. Their voice, calm yet cold, echoed across a galaxy teetering on the edge of collapse. Your leaders lied to you. They condemned an entire species to death out of fear. And now, they ask you to fight for them. The figure raised a gloved hand, and behind them, the fleet shifted, silent, orderly, unstoppable. We do not seek conquest. We do not seek destruction. "We seek justice." A pause. Then the final words, spoken not as a threat, but as an undeniable fact. "The council will fall." The transmission cut out. And across the galaxy, worlds began to burn, not from invasion, but from rebellion. The silent invasion was complete. Humanity had already won. Velthar Prime, the capital of the Galactic Council, had stood for millennia as a symbol of unity and power. Its golden spires stretched into the sky. Its vast halls filled with representatives from 100 species, all working to maintain control over the vast reaches of known space. Now those halls were filled with panic. The breaking point. The silent invasion had worked too well. Entire fleets had defected. Supply chains were collapsing. Entire systems were turning against the Council, not because they supported humanity, but because they had seen the truth. The Council had betrayed an entire species, and if they had done it once, they could do it again. The few loyal admirals left scrambled to regroup, ordering their remaining fleets to secure the Council's most important systems. But it was like trying to hold back a black hole with their bare hands. For every fleet they managed to reorganize, another one vanished. For every system they secured, another burned in rebellion. And then the humans arrived. The Shadow Fleet. Velthar Prime's orbital defenses had been reinforced for centuries, layered with shield generators, auto-defense cannons, and entire squadrons of elite warships. The Council's leaders believed that, at the very least, this world could withstand an assault. But when the human fleet arrived, they did not attack. They simply appeared, hanging in the void like specters of vengeance. Their ships, darker than the void itself, drifted just beyond weapons range, forming a perfect blockade around the system. No hails, no warnings, just silence. At first, the Council's admirals were confused. Was this a trick? A psychological tactic? Or was humanity finally hesitating? They sent a war fleet forward to break the blockade. It was a mistake. The moment the Council's forces entered the field, the human warships moved, not with desperation, not with brute force, but with chilling precision. They did not waste firepower. They did not engage in drawn-out battles. Instead, they targeted command ships first, cutting off fleet coordination. They jammed communications, isolating enemy vessels before striking. They shut down power grids, forcing warships into darkness before tearing them apart. Within 30 minutes, the Council's counterattack was gone. The blockade remained unbroken. Velthar Prime, for the first time in its long history, was trapped. The final demand. Within the Council chamber, fear gave way to desperation. Some demanded a last stand. Others argued for escape, but there was nowhere to run. Then, a final transmission came through, one that was not broadcast across the galaxy, but sent directly to the Council itself. The same figure appeared, standing aboard the bridge of the lead human warship, their helmet reflecting the dying light of Velthar's sun. Their words were simple. "Your time is over. Surrender now." A pause, or be forgotten. For the first time in history, the leaders of the Galactic Council realized they were no longer in control. The fall had begun. Velthar Prime stood paralyzed under the weight of its impending fate. The Council had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, dictating the course of civilizations, shaping the laws of war, and deciding which species thrived and which were cast aside. But now, they were the ones standing on the precipice of annihilation. And they knew it. The collapse of authority. Across the capital, riots erupted as word spread that the Council's forces had been defeated without a fight. Entire planetary sectors had turned against them. Their warships, their fleets, their once mighty armadas, none of it had stopped the advance of the forgotten species. The Council had been built on the illusion of power, the belief that they were untouchable. Humanity had shattered that illusion. Desperation gripped the remaining Council members. Some screamed for a counterattack, demanding every last ship be thrown into a final desperate battle. Others argued for surrender, whispering that perhaps humanity would show mercy if they laid down their arms. And then, the decision was made for them. The humans were landing. The arrival. For all the defenses, for all the planetary shields and automated gun turrets, humanity did not storm Velthar Prime in a grand invasion. They walked straight through the front doors. One by one, planetary defenses shut down without a shot fired. Weapons refused to activate. Security drones ignored their programming. Entire armies surrendered without a fight, their officers dropping their weapons before battle even began. Because every single planetary leader, every general, every strategist had already seen what happened to those who resisted. Velthar Prime, the seat of power for the greatest empire in the galaxy, fell without a single casualty. And at the heart of it all, in the grand chamber where the council once dictated the fates of lesser species, the last of the so-called rulers of the galaxy stood waiting for the ones they had abandoned. The reckoning. The doors of the council chamber hissed open. A figure entered, clad in black armor, the helmet that had become a symbol of Earth's vengeance reflecting the trembling lights above. Behind them, others followed, men and women of Earth, walking through the halls of those who had left them for dead. No words were spoken at first. No threats, no demands, no orders for execution, only silence. And then, finally, the voice that had haunted the galaxy spoke once more. You ruled through fear. The words echoed through the vast chamber, cutting through the tension like a blade. You held our fate in your hands, decided we were not worth saving. A pause. Now, we hold your fate in ours. For the first time, the council leaders, once so proud, so powerful, knelt before a species they had once erased from history. Because now, history belonged to humanity. The Galactic Council, once the supreme authority of the known universe, knelt before the children of a forsaken world. The Grand Chamber of Velthar Prime, once filled with the voices of rulers dictating the fates of lesser species, was now silent. The human delegation stood at the center of the chamber, their leader clad in black armor, their helmet hiding whatever expression lay beneath. Behind them, their warships hung in orbit, a constant reminder of what had led to this moment. The council had expected brutality. They had seen entire fleets wiped from existence. They had heard the screams of fallen worlds. Now, kneeling before their conquerors, they waited for the inevitable order, the execution of their rule, their history, and their lives. But the humans did not strike them down. Instead, the figure spoke. The verdict of Earth. You called yourselves the guardians of civilization. The voice was calm, but behind it was something deeper. A weight, a history of suffering that could never be erased. Yet, when one of your own was in need, you abandoned them. Not out of weakness, not out of necessity, but out of fear. A ripple of unease passed through the kneeling officials. Some tried to protest, but the words died in their throats. They had no defense. The truth had already been laid bare. You ruled through control, through deceit, through the careful manipulation of who was allowed to rise and who was left to fall. The figure stepped forward, standing over the trembling remnants of the council. And now, that era has ended. A flick of the wrist, and a holographic display materialized in the air. It showed a single document, an official decree, stamped with the insignia of the United Terran Federation. The council members' eyes widened. It was not an order of execution. It was an order of exile. The fate of the fallen rulers. Gasps filled the chamber. Exile. Some council members looked relieved. At least they would live. Others, particularly those who had spent their lives at the pinnacle of power, looked horrified. Because in many ways, exile was a fate worse than death. You will not die today, the human leader continued. You will not be executed as you once decreed for us. You will not be remembered as martyrs. They gestured to the hologram. Instead, you will be cast out, removed from power, stripped of everything you once commanded. Your names will be erased from history, just as you tried to erase ours. The council members could only stare in stunned silence. The galaxy they had once ruled would move forward without them. They would be given a single ship, sent to the far reaches of uncharted space, and left to fend for themselves. No fleets, no servants, no influence, nothing. For the first time in their existence, they would know what it meant to be forgotten. The new order begins. As the decree was finalized, the black-armored figure turned away, walking toward the chamber doors. Behind them, the former rulers of the galaxy were led away. Toward their ship, toward the unknown, toward the fate they had once forced upon Earth. And as the doors sealed shut, the transmission that had once spread fear across the stars played one final time. We remember, but now it was no longer a declaration of vengeance. It was a promise. Humanity had returned, and they would never be forgotten again. The fall of the Galactic Council was not marked by war drums or triumphant parades. There was no grand coronation, no banners raised in conquest. It ended in silence. As the former rulers of the galaxy were sent into exile, the weight of their sins pressed upon them. Once, they had commanded fleets that spanned entire star clusters. Now they drifted toward the unknown, reduced to a cautionary tale, a lesson in what happened to those who wielded power without wisdom. And as their ship vanished into the dark, the universe stood on the edge of a new era, the rebirth of Earth. For centuries, Earth had been a ghost, a forgotten world spoken of only in classified files and hushed whispers. To the rest of the galaxy, it had been nothing more than a dead rock, wiped from history. Now, it was the new heart of civilization. The United Terran Federation, formed from the survivors of Earth and the scattered remnants of humanity, had grown beyond its birthplace. Their fleets stretched across the stars, not as conquerors, but as watchers. Their technology, forged in hardship and isolation, had surpassed that of their former oppressors. Yet, despite their overwhelming advantage, humanity did not claim dominion over the galaxy. They had not fought to rule. They had fought to prove they had always deserved a place among the stars. And now, with the Council gone, that place was theirs. The Galactic Reckoning. Across the galaxy, worlds that had once been forced into servitude by the Council found themselves free for the first time. Some rejoiced. Others feared what would come next. Would humanity simply replace the old rulers with themselves? Would they impose their own form of tyranny? But the answer came in the form of a single decree, broadcast across every world, in every language. The age of empires is over. No species shall rule over another. There would be no new council, no new ruling elite to dictate the fate of entire civilizations. Instead, humanity proposed something different, a federation, where every species had a voice, where no world would ever be left behind again, where the mistakes of the past would never be repeated. Some doubted, some resisted, but most understood one undeniable truth. Humanity had suffered as no other species had, and that suffering had forged them into something greater. The final transmission. On the ruins of the once mighty council chamber, the leader of the United Terran Federation stood before a final broadcast. This time, they did not wear the black helmet that had struck fear into the hearts of their enemies. This time, they stood unmasked, a human, scared, weary, but unbroken. For too long, we were forgotten. Their voice, once cold and calculating, now carried something else, something that had been missing from the galaxy for too long. Hope. We have not returned to conquer. We have not returned to rule. We have returned so that no species will ever suffer what we did. The camera panned outward, revealing not just the humans, but representatives of countless species standing beside them. Former enemies, now allies. The old order has fallen. A new future begins today, one where no world is left behind. A long pause. Then the final words, spoken not as a warning, but as a promise. We are humanity. We remember, and we will build something better. The transmission ended, and across the stars, the galaxy took its first breath of a new dawn.